A lot of big developments in the war in Ukraine over the past 24 hours. A short time ago, word from Russia that Wagner will be asked to turn over all of its weapons, lay down its arms. Is this the end of the Wagner group? We also hear from Russian authorities they've dropped charges against Prigozhin, the mercenary leader who led this quote-unquote coup over the weekend. And German state media over the past 24 hours reporting claiming peace talks could begin as early as next month, that global leaders met secretly in Copenhagen and they're on board with peace talks. So to make sense of all of this, former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter joins us now. Scott, thanks for coming back to the show. Let's, I guess, start with Prigozhin and this news of Wagner. Are they done?
Wagner as a private military contractor capable of fielding a conventional military force is finished. It's done. It's over.
And it seemed we saw videos of Russians apparently arm in arm with Wagner forces. There was a lot of apparent celebration. The West was saying, wow, he was greeted with open arms, Prigozhin. I saw a number of CNN headlines saying that was a hero's welcome for Prigozhin when he went into Rostov-on-Don, and now charges are dropped against Prigozhin. So will he be prosecuted in any way? Is he going to live out his days in Belarus? And what do you make of this Western narrative of sort of a hero's welcome for him?
Let's start with the hero's welcome. Rostov is a city of 1 million people. Count the number of civilians you saw in the square welcoming Wagner. First of all, the vast majority of the civilians there were there out of curiosity. When Wagner first approached, there were no cheers. In fact, Wagner's forces were confronted over and over again by Russians saying, "What are you doing here? Why are you making this mess?" Wagner put people on the ground at gunpoint. Wagner, who has no legal authority whatsoever. People need to understand that. This is not a military unit. It's not a paramilitary unit. It's a private military contractor who has no legal authority to operate on Russian soil at all. So these are criminals in a Russian city bearing arms, seeking to take control of the headquarters that is commanding the special military operation at a time when Russia is a life and death existential military struggle against Ukraine and the collective West. The people cheered when Wagner left. They cheered because there was no civil war. They thanked Wagner for making the right decision to get out of town. What those people didn't realize is that Rostov-on-Don was surrounded by 10 to 15,000 Chechen Akhmat special forces who had sent a message to Prigozhin that you're going to die in a matter of hours. That when Putin gives the green light, we will come in and we will kill you and we will kill all of your Wagner mercenaries. Prigozhin also received the same message from his commanders as they approached Moscow. They entered the Serpukov area and there were 2,500 Russian special forces lined up there, dug in. They were backed up by thousands more special forces who were outflanking the Wagner forces. And Wagner commanders came back and said, "We're going to get into a fight." Now here's another thing people don't realize. What is a basic combat load? That's what a soldier carries on him to engage in a fight. You know how quickly you fire through your basic combat load in a heavy firefight? Like that. Where's the resupply come? Wagner would have run out of ammunition in hours, and they would have all died. That was the reality. Prigozhin didn't negotiate anything. Prigozhin was told, leave. You're done. Unplugged. Get out of Russia, and Wagner is finished. And that's what we're seeing. So all this concept of a negotiated settlement, Prigozhin making a point, Wagner being treated as heroes. Wagner is a criminal entity. A criminal entity. 3/4 of Wagner refused to participate in this coup d'etat. This coup has been planned for months. Russia has known about it. Russia has been coordinating with the commanders of Wagner to avoid a civil war, to have them conform with Russian law, to have the Wagner fighters sign contracts binding them to the Ministry of Defense, so now that they have a legal status, to get the commanders to do the same thing, to end Prigozhin's billion-dollar money-making venture. People need to understand that Prigozhin is not a military commander. He is a businessman who makes money off of slaughter and blood. Bakhmut, where 20,000 Wagner fighters died. People need to remember that. There is no wonderful formula for Wagner's success. They're not an elite fighting force. 30,000 of the 50,000 Wagner soldiers who fought in Bakhmut were criminals, convicts, with 21 days training. You cannot become an elite fighting force with 21 days training. You were given 21 days training, basic small arms knowledge, basic maneuver, and told advance or die. That was it. If you survive, your conviction is swiped clean. These were fanatics who fought aggressively, but they're not elite. 20,000 of them died. These units suffered 60% casualties, and Prigozhin's lecturing people saying, we gave you a case study of how you should have advanced through. Prigozhin knows nothing of war. Again, he has no military experience whatsoever. Every operational and tactical decision is made by his commander's council, and this commander's council signed off on tactics that caused shock units to lose 60% casualties, 20,000 dead, and he's saying that the Russians are slaughtering their troops. If the Russian Ministry of Defense followed the Prigozhin model, 300,000 Russians would be dead, and they still would have only advanced a few kilometers. Prigozhin is insane, and that's what people need to understand. Wagner, they fought bravely, they fought heroically, but to call Wagner elite, no elite unit suffers 60% casualties. That's not elite, that's fanatical. And here's the other important thing. The Russian military did not want to fight the Battle of Bakhmut. Prigozhin entered that battle because he was in a very difficult situation. Russian law does not permit a private military army, which is what Wagner had become. It can't operate on Russian soil. So they were going to pause the battlefield, pull Wagner out, and reconcile this legality issue. Prigozhin realized the second they did that, he would lose his billion-dollar business. So he pushed into Bakhmut to keep the fight going, to compel the Russians to fight, sacrificing 20,000 men. Every soldier that died in Bakhmut, it's Prigozhin's fault. He murdered them as a business decision to compel the Ministry of Defense to give him the ammunition to create a precedent of supplying a private military contractor in violation of Russian law. And he continued to push that battle even when the Russian High Command said, "We don't want this." He forced the Russian High Command to divert forces from other areas of the front to protect the flanks of Wagner as they advanced. Thousands of Russians were wounded and killed because of Prigozhin. So this idea that Prigozhin is some sort of military genius who is in command of an elite fighting force that saved Russia is absurd in the extreme. I'm not denigrating the courage of the individual Wagner fighter or the tactical competency of their commanders. I'm telling you that Yevgeny Prigozhin is a psychopathic, mass murdering criminal, and he's alive today only because Vladimir Putin didn't want to start a civil war where Russians would end up killing Russians.
Fascinating. We had just a short time ago the question of whether or not Prigozhin was working alone in this coup, this march towards Moscow. Rostislav Ayshenko, political scientist, Russian political scientist, says it's not likely that he was working alone. The amount of organization in order to move on this would have required some kind of support from within Russia, perhaps from the capital, from the Kremlin in some capacity. Do you buy that analysis? Do you think he was working with other people, or he was working alone in this decision?
No, I mean, that's an absurdity, frankly speaking. Wagner had become a massive enterprise. Again, by the time they withdrew 25,000 troops, that's a significant force, with tanks, artillery, aircraft. They didn't need the Kremlin's help or the military's help to plot a coup. The help that Prigozhin got was from his military command council, but here's the rub. See, Prigozhin's thinking about a coup had been known to everybody. Everybody. The CIA knew about it. We know this now because they admitted briefing the Gang of Eight in Congress about Prigozhin's coup. They briefed them weeks ago, months ago. MI6 briefed the Prime Minister about the same thing. MI6 coordinated with the Ukrainian government, telling them to stop your offensive operations until Prigozhin's coup goes forward, because there's a chance there's going to be a civil war in Russia where they will remove forces from the battlefield, and then you can do your attack. Everybody was aware of this, including the Kremlin. But what the Kremlin was doing is they wanted to avoid a civil war. They wanted to avoid a situation where they had to go in and forcibly disarm 25,000 Wagner soldiers. So they reached out to the commanders. Prigozhin could not have done this without the commanders' help within Wagner. That's the reality. And as we found out, 4 out of the 5 members of the command council refused to help Prigozhin. Only one helped him, took his troops. But the rest of Wagner stayed in the barracks, refused to participate. And even the troops that went in, the majority of them were misled. They were told that they were going to secure the border against Ukrainian attacks. Once they arrived, they realized that they had been misled, and that half of Wagner wasn't going to participate in any fighting no matter what. Half of the Wagner troops that were there, because they were misled. People confronted Prigozhin while he was in Rostov, Wagner people saying, "What the hell are you doing?" Only the fanatics went forward to Moscow. And what the Russians did there, the Russian government did, is they allowed them through because they didn't want to start a civil war, but they created the final barrier at Serpukhov. They got Akhmat to surround Rostov, and then the phone call was made to Prigozhin. We're about to kill everybody. Is this what you want? Prigozhin was hoping, and I believe he was told by Russian oligarchs and Russian exiles who were controlled by British intelligence. We know there was connectivity between Prigozhin and Khodorkovsky, who's a British MI6-controlled oligarch in London. See, Prigozhin had red flags all over the place. He had failed businesses. The only viable business he had left was Wagner. He makes billions of dollars off of this mercenary bloodlust, sacrificing his soldiers. He makes money off of that. And he didn't want to lose this. And so he was told that if you move, there are people in Moscow who will support you. He led himself to believe that the military bought into his anti-Shoigu, anti-Gerasimov propaganda, that once he made the move, that the military would rally around him. He was told that politicians would leave Putin, surround him. So he drove towards Moscow, and none of that happened. None of that happened. Everybody rallied around Vladimir Putin. And in the end, Prigozhin was alone. His troops were scared, and they recognized that they were all going to die. And that's why this deal was cut. But Prigozhin had no help from within Russia. He had a lot of help from outside of Russia, which makes him a traitor. So we'll see what his future is. The Russian government doesn't look well on traitors. And I don't think Prigozhin's going to have a long and healthy retirement.
Yeah, Sergei Lavrov saying they are investigating the Western intelligence collusion in this, and so that investigation will go. I want to get you out of here on this question. German state television channel claiming that peace talks could begin as early as next month. They claim that a number of global leaders met last week in Copenhagen, and they are on board with a planned peace talk next week. Do you buy that?
Well, first, I have no doubt that they met. I have no doubt that they talked. I have no doubt that they're looking for peace. But here's the interesting thing. You know, Russia has been saying all along that we, being Russia, want a negotiated settlement to this. Right. And Russia has actively been pursuing this. It's been rejected all along by the West. The West has rejected it. Why? Because the West was operating under the assumption that Ukraine was going to win this war, that Ukraine was going to put pressure, that we need to give Ukraine a chance to get a dominating posture militarily so that Russia will make numerous concessions. That isn't going to happen. So now suddenly they're saying we believe in negotiations.
Right.
At a time when Russia's winning and prevailing. You know who wasn't in Copenhagen talking about negotiations? The Russians. The Russians aren't going to play this game.
Right.
Russia has a military objective of the defeat of the Ukrainian army, strategic defeat of the Ukrainian army. That's demilitarization. They have a political objective of denazification and permanent neutrality for Ukraine. And the only negotiation is when Ukraine agrees to all these terms. So until which time the Copenhagen group are willing to say Russia has won the war and Ukraine must concede all of this, they're just talking to themselves. It's literally a self-licking ice cream cone where all these people sit around and enjoy their own company. But Russia wasn't there, and Russia's the only vote that counts at this point in time. The only vote. Because they have thrown away any leverage they might have had with Russia a long time ago by insisting on pursuing this war. Now that they've doubled in, they put all their chips in, Russia's mobilized, Russia's ready to win. They want to negotiate away Russia's victory. Russia will never go for this.
Yeah, and of course, Vladimir Putin 2 weeks ago at the Africa Summit, the St. Petersburg Summit, holding up the peace agreement that was signed by the Ukrainians and thrown in the trash.
And peace agreement signed by the Ukrainians, but remember, Minsk wasn't signed by the Ukrainians because Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, the German and French leaders who promised their support, were now saying it was all a sham. We lied to Putin. We misled Putin. So who is Putin supposed to believe? Are Ukrainian government that can sign the deal and walk away from it? Always saying that we always lie to Russia, that we only negotiate to get an advantage, to buy time? A European community that wants the strategic defeat of Russia has shown a proclivity in the past to lie about diplomatic arrangements, negotiated settlements, to buy time, to gain strength. And now they're going to come to Putin and say, we want a negotiated settlement. To do what? To buy time, to gain strength. At a time when Russia's winning, Putin said about 2014 he regrets not destroying the Ukrainian army at that time. When he had them surrounded, he could have destroyed them. He said it was his biggest mistake. Right? He will never make that mistake again. When he says he's never going to make that mistake again, I'd believe it.
And those who've studied him very, very closely say he's one of those people, a politician who learns from his mistakes. So, you know, imagine that. Yeah, fool me once, right? So, right. Yeah, we'll see on this. Scott Ritter, thank you so much for your analysis on this. I know it's been a very busy past 72 hours watching this unfold inside of Russia. Thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott. And I just looked over here in the chat. Someone says Scott has been right so far.